Thank you so much for joining us. We are looking at a webinar today about working with the federal government. I am Amanda Jo Nicholson. I'm your Vice President of Member Services here at the Winter Haven Chamber of Commerce. And before we get started, just a couple of logistics for the call. Everybody's going to be muted while Karen is presenting, and my colleague Karen from the Chamber is going to monitor your chat room. So if you have any questions, you've got a couple of options. You can either hit the little chat button at the bottom and type in a question, or just unmute yourselves and just jump right in there. Karen has wonderfully agreed to field any questions as we go. So I'm just going to let one more participant in. So good morning again. Today's webinar, I feel, is especially relevant as we are all looking to reimagine what our business is going to look like. We're restarting our economy. We have really, really great partners, and we're blessed to be working with the folks at the Small Business Development Center. And I just can't thank them enough for their tireless support of ourselves as a chamber, of our chamber members, and of our community here right across Central Florida. Leading our discussion today is going to be Karen Krymski, who is a procurement specialist with them and with the Florida Procurement Technical Assistance Center. Wow, that's a hard thing to say this time in the morning at the University of South Florida. So I'm going to hand the program over to Karen, and she's going to walk us through here and the basics of what we need to do. So Karen, over to you.
Thanks, Amanda Jo, and thank you to the Winter Haven Chamber. Good morning, everyone. As Amanda Jo mentioned, I am the procurement specialist, and we usually refer to me as the PTAC, so you don't have a whole mouthful of words going on. But my specialty really within the Florida Small Business Development Center here at USF is federal procurement. And those of you that may have been on the webinar or the seminar earlier with the Winter Haven Chamber was all about local and state procurement. Federal procurement is different, and I do want to emphasize that every government vertical is different than the other government verticals. There aren't really many crossovers. The language is similar, but the federal government follows what they call the Federal Acquisition Regulations, or the FAR, which is particularly germane to the federal government. And if you have the opportunity ever to have a federal contract of any type, you will find many, many, many references to the FAR in that contract. And it is your responsibility to understand what the FAR clause states so that you know what it is you're responsible for. And I don't want to get too much into that, because this program this morning, this FedGov 101, is this your new pivot? This is actually a very top line overview of what it takes to do business in the federal government. It is not meant to be a be all end all. It's not meant to, when you get off this call, that you're ready to jump right in and start contacting federal agencies. It's really meant, actually, in reality, it's meant to probably cause more questions than answers. And that's okay, because as I put on here, the journey begins. If you ever have the opportunity to be with us in in-person class when I teach, and this is actually a very modified presentation of what I teach in person, but I always go to one of our tables, and I look at a little speck of dust on the table, and I said, do you see this little speck of dust? This is where we are right now in your journey. So it's a very, very, very small encapsulated overview of what you need to do to get started. I do want to mention that I have colleagues that are in the Winter Haven area that can work with you on business initiatives. They can also be your introduction to me, although you don't need an introduction to me. But we all work, our whole goal within the Florida Small Business Development Center at USF is to help our businesses be successful. So whatever you need, whether it's business consulting, whether it's marketing, whether it's international, whether you're in agriculture, and actually, I do want to say that the PPP grants are now open, or excuse me, the EIDL grants, pardon me, the EIDL grants are now open for agricultural initiatives only. But we're available to assist you, answer questions, get you started, help you on your journey. As I said, we're all trying to help our businesses in our 10-county region be successful. So you want to go ahead and advance the next slide, Amanda Jo? Okay, so the first thing that you really want to understand in federal government is not for the faint of heart. It usually takes a while to get a federal contract. I do recommend in most cases that unless your company has what we call commercial standing, that you have some revenue lines, that you have some financial wherewithal. Because as I mentioned earlier, you can't just simply jump in and say, oh, okay, I'm going to do federal and next week I'm going to have a contract. You know, I hear people thinking that all the time, and particularly now, you know, they're thinking, oh, well, I'll just sell the government because they buy everything. They buy almost everything. But more importantly, there's a lot of work that needs to be done before you actually jump in. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. But just as a review of the slide, the first thing that I like to take a look at is how long has your company been in business? And truly, if your company is just getting started, typically that's not a good place for the federal government. And here's a really good reason why. The federal government, as most governments, as most entities, they don't like risk. And the federal government in particular, most of the people that you're dealing with in the federal government, they are career federal employees. So a contracting officer that you might be dealing with, or a small business officer, or anyone, a program manager, anyone that you're dealing in the federal government, more than likely, this is part of a career journey. And if they take a risk on a company that has no experience, no expertise, no core competencies, nothing that they can actually hang their hat on, that those people are actually taking a very large risk. And if the company does not perform, then that is not a good evaluation or a good review for them. And they can actually be dinged in terms of progression in their career or their retirement or whatever. So it's not, you know, I guess you have to look at it as it's not all about, it's really all about them. And it really is all about the government, the federal government, and what value you bring. And one of the most important things that I can tell you about federal government, and probably about state and local too, is you have, as a business owner, as a business development person, or however you're representing a company, you have to present your value add. And if you can't present your value add, they certainly are not going to tell you what your value add is to them. So being in business for a while, having your necessary business systems in place, and that means, and one of the things that I see a lot of people, small businesses across the board, whether they're doing federal or not, is they don't have their financial systems in place. They may not understand cash flow. They may not have their QuickBooks or their other accounting programs set up. Maybe they don't even understand what a financial accounting system is, or why they need one, or how they should set it up, or about a P&L or a balance sheet, or, you know, they may not understand any of those. And that would be, if you are not in that place at that point in your business's life cycle, I would strongly encourage you to work with some of our business consultants first. In fact, I refer routinely to our business folks at the SBDC, because every business needs to be strong, no matter if you're doing federal, state, local, or just in the commercial side. You have to be strong financially. And I think a lot of businesses are finding that out now with the issues that we're facing in the pandemic. You can't, and the thing about a banker, you know, people want to go to a bank. Well, you know, the time that when you need, the time to see a banker is not when you need money. The time to have a relationship with a banker is before you need money, and not the teller, but someone that has maybe a commercial lender, someone else in the bank that really can get to know your business. And especially in government contracting, that is so very true, because one of the issues in government contracting, and a lot of times, is that you may get a contract and the government may say, well, we need 5 people. Well, that's great. Maybe you have the 5 people that can be on their premise. They call it on premise. But in many cases, you're going to have to pay those people before you get paid by the government. So how are you going to pay them? You know, you may have up to, if you're a subcontractor, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, a subcontractor rather than a prime contractor, you could be waiting for 3 or 4 months for your money, depending on when the prime gets paid. And that's not unusual, because the primes, the very, very, very large companies like the General Dynamics and the Lockheed Martins and all of those gold emblem federal contractors, it could be up to 90 or 120 days before they get paid. And most often they don't pay their subcontractors until they get paid. So you have to answer the question, am I able to pay all my employees? Because I'm going to bet that none of your employees are going to wait 3 or 4 months to get paid. You're going to have to answer that question. Am I going to be able, or if it's just me doing a job, am I going to be able to wait 3 or 4 months if I'm a subcontractor to this entity? So all of those business systems, those all really come into play, because if you're not understanding how your business's cash flow or how much money you're going to need maybe 3 or 4 months out to pay your bills or whatever, in addition to paying yourself and meeting your own personal bills, that could be a very big hardship. And the one thing that I really want to emphasize with you is you do not want to get a federal contract and not perform well. That is really a recipe for disaster, because if you don't perform well, the federal government has a rating system, and you will not ever have access to it, but you will be very aware of it. It's called CPARS. CPARS is a rating system for contractors. It's usually for the primes, but the federal system is now going to start drilling down to the subcontractors. So what that really means is they're going to rate you when you're finished with your contract. How well did this contractor perform? And if you did not do well, it's going to be very, very difficult for you to get any additional federal work ever, because one of the things that becomes very apparent to most people very soon is that even though the federal government is very large, the federal government has over 504 bureaus, agencies, and departments, but it becomes very small, because that CPARS system is available to every contracting officer and program manager in the federal system. So if they want to look you up to see if you've ever had a federal contract or how you've performed, they can very easily find that out. And so you want to do your very, very, very best, and you don't want to be learning how to put your business systems into place or adjusting things. You want to have everything as tight as possible when you take on a federal contract. The last bullet point is you really want to understand that when you start a federal journey, that it could very well take up to 2 years to get a contract, particularly if you're planning on priming a contract. That's not something that I recommend for small businesses, and I'll talk to you about that a little bit later. There's actually a slide on that, but I really recommend that most small businesses start out as a subcontractor, because there's an awful lot to learn, and you can certainly learn a lot from your prime contractor. The other opportunity with being a subcontractor is you don't have any of the direct responsibilities to the agency. You get to do what the work that you like to do. So if you're if you're a writer, you get to write. If you're a marketing person, you get to do marketing. If you're a painter, you get to paint. And I'm talking about painter in construction. If you're an electrician, you get to work with probably the GC and then the agency. So you have a couple of filters, and you can learn from all those folks as time goes on. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so registering to do business with the federal government. So this is where the journey really begins. The first thing that everybody has to do in the federal government to do business, whether you're a subcontractor or a prime, is you must have a Dun & Bradstreet number or a DUNS number. You may hear that DUNS number. If you don't have a Dun & Bradstreet number, or you're not aware if you have a Dun & Bradstreet number, I would suggest that probably all of you that have been in business for at least 6 months have a Dun & Bradstreet number. You may not know you have one. You can go to, you can just Google DUNS lookup, D-U-N-S lookup, Google it, And when you get to that website, you simply type your business's name in and the state Florida, and you will find out very quickly if you have a Dun & Bradstreet number. And then you can have it simply email sent to you. If you don't have one, if it tells you that there's no results, you simply go to a website called Dunn's I Update, and there you can register for one. I would let you know that what you want to do when you're registering for one, and if you're planning to do government contracting, please make sure you check the box that says, when it's asked you, are you registering for a Dun & Bradstreet to do government contracting? Check yes, because if you don't check yes, you could wait up to 30 days for your Dun & Bradstreet number. If you're looking to do government contracting, it's usually within 48 hours. So do that first, and then once you get your Dun & Bradstreet number, the very next thing that you really must do in order to be considered a legitimate contractor in the federal system is to register for a SAM registration. And please do not Google SAM registration, because it will take you to all these third-party contractors where they will charge you anywhere from $500 and up. This is free. You simply go to SAM, like the guy, sam.gov, and you'll come to a US government screen, and you create a login and you simply walk through that process. The 4 items that you need in order to complete your SAM registration are your Dun & Bradstreet number, your EIN or your TIN number for your company, your bank account information, and your industry classification codes. And the industry classification codes, you can start out with 1 when you do your registration, and you can expand that as time goes on. And that's something that we can help you with at the SBDC if you're having difficulty with that. But you will need those 4 items to complete your SAM registration. And it will take you approximately 30 to 40 minutes to do that registration. It's quite comprehensive. There's a lot of reading. I always caution my clients to make sure you understand the questions that is asking you. I will just give you an example. I had a client a couple years ago that called me that he was having difficulty. And the first thing I always do is I review the SAM registration, and to make sure that the questions are answered, if it's what the NAICS codes are, just a general overview. And I learned that this particular client had checked the box that his company was federally debarred. And when I saw that, I thought, whoa, well, maybe this is why he's not getting any contracts, because that was his problem. And so when I asked him, and he said, no, my company's not federally debarred. I said, well, you checked that box? Well, no, I didn't. And so I had to send him a screenshot and showed him, and I told him to log in and uncheck that box. So, so always make sure that you're reading, and that's a big thing overall in the federal government. Please read. I can't tell you how many contracting officers have told me that the reason why a company does not get a contract is because they have not responded to what the government wants. They haven't read the requirements. So please read. Take your highlighter, print it out, highlight things. That you can't even imagine, because people send me responses to read or to review, and and the first thing I'll do is I'll look at the requirement, what are they asking, and then I'll go to the response. And if they haven't given the government what they want, the government is just going to, they have a nice big wastebasket in the contracting officer's desk, and that's where it'll go. The other thing that I do want to make sure that you understand is, in many cases, particularly in the very beginning stages of a contract, if they ask you to respond, they will give you page limitations and type font size and some other things. And you really must follow it here, because if they limit the number of pages, say they limit it to 15 and you do 16, guess where your response goes in the very beginning? Nobody even reads it. It goes in the basket, because the contracting officer's admin or the contractor's representative, they get paid to count pages, to look at things like that if they feel that if you can't follow directions before you ever get a contract, how are you going to follow directions and instructions when you get a contract? So, I just have to emphasize, please read and follow directions. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, now that you're registered and you're in SAM, and it will take about 2 weeks for you to get an active SAM registration from the federal government, and you will get an email on that. The next thing that you want to evaluate is the marketplace, okay? A minute ago, I said that people think that the federal government buys everything, so I'll sell something to the federal government. Well, actually, there are some things that the federal government doesn't buy, but I'll tell you a funny, a couple of years ago, I had a guy call me. He wasn't a client. I don't know who he was. He called me and he said, I need to know in the federal government, I'm the largest taco shell manufacturer in the state of Florida. Where do I sell my taco shells? I had no clue. So I actually went into a federal free tool called FPDS. That's frankpauldavidsam.gov, fpds.gov. It is the intelligence tool in the federal government that basically shows you which agency buys what you sell. So I literally put in quotes, taco shells, hit enter, and it was kind of funny in a way. I kind of had my intuition told me one agency, but in actuality, it's the Federal Bureau of Prisons that buys hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of taco shells. So my joke always is, if you don't like tacos, do not go to federal prison because you will be eating a lot of tacos. So he was smart enough to ask that question. So I will throw it over to the audience. Who buys what you sell? Use FPDS, fpds.gov. It is a free intelligence tool. It's a good place to start, because couple of things that you're going to learn, not only are you going to learn what agencies buy what you sell, but you're also going to learn who are the prime contractors that sell most of it, who is your major competition, and how do they buy it. So one of the things very early on for businesses that are really just getting started in the federal government, and I've had a lot of clients that have come to me and they say, well, I need to get a GSA schedule, a General Service Administration schedule. That's sort of the answer that people think is to all their problems in the federal government. I need a GSA and then I can sell to the federal government. In reality, 1 out of every 3 companies that gets a GSA schedule fails because they don't meet the minimum thresholds of how much the government buys off a GSA schedule. The other thing is that many federal agencies do not buy off of a GSA schedule. So if you are in an IT business, I will tell you most agencies buy off of some type of pre-negotiated contract. I will tell you that. But in many other cases, they basically buy through purchase orders, delivery orders, blanket purchase agreements under simplified acquisitions. There's many ways that you can sell to the federal government without a GSA if your agency does not buy through a GSA. If they buy through a GSA, then it's going to be very difficult for you. But when you do this research, you're going to know that. You're going to know what my top agencies are, who is buying a lot of what I sell, who's not buying what I sell, because it would be a huge waste of your time to think, oh, I really want to sell to the Army. Well, you go and you see, and well, the Army doesn't really buy what I sell. So that would be a huge waste of your time. And if you don't understand that, and you have a conversation with somebody, either a small business officer or a contracting officer with that agency, and you're trying to sell them something, it really will not be a very good first impression for you. You really want to do as much research as possible about the agency that you're trying to sell to, because they will know very quickly that the only thing you're interested in is money. I mean, you're looking at them as a bank, basically. So if you haven't done your research and you can't speak to someone in that agency intelligently about their procurement or what they buy or how they buy it or something that's upcoming on their procurement forecast or whatever it is, it's going to be a very short conversation. I'm going to share with you something that's about me personally. I built a federal channel for an IT managed services company a while back. And during my own personal journey, one of the agencies that we were targeting was HHS, specifically NIH. And I had made my way to a woman who was the guardian of a very large contract vehicle that NIH had at the time. And I really wanted to speak with her because I wanted to talk to her about our IT services. So I was very fortunate. I happened to be in DC. I set up an appointment with her, and she graciously gave me an appointment. And so I started to talk with her. And she started asking me questions that I did not know the answers to, that I should have known the answers to. And she basically called me out on it. And she said, you weren't ready for this meeting. And I was embarrassed, but it was a huge learning for me. And I tell that story because, you know, it happens to all of us. And I don't want any of my clients to be in that situation. I want you to be as well-versed and ask very intelligent questions and get information that you couldn't have gotten off the internet or anywhere else before you have that meeting or that conversation, because it may be the only conversation you get to have with that person. And if you don't do somewhat of an impressive mode with them, then it's going to be sort of a death knell. So I would really encourage you to be as knowledgeable about an agency and what they're buying and so forth. So Amanda Jo's advanced to the next slide. So
Karen, I'm so sorry to interrupt. We do have a question in the chat room about the GSA schedule.
Okay.
It looks like they're just wanting a little bit more information on what is a GSA schedule.
Okay, thank you. A GSA schedule it stands for General Service Administration. The GSA is a very large agency within the government, and they basically act as a procurement vehicle for the federal government. A GSA schedule is basically a pre-negotiated contract with the federal government to buy items that you sell. So just a little bit about the GSA process, because that will probably help you. When you apply to get a GSA contract, then it is an application process. You must submit to the GSA, along with other paperwork, invoices of products or services that you have sold in the past on the commercial side, or to other government agencies, or to state and local government. It can be to anybody. It doesn't have to be to the federal government. But invoices of basically what they're looking for is the price points. Because with the federal government, you have to consider them to be your very, very best friend. And that's the price that you're going to charge them, the very best friend price. So if you charge somebody $100 an hour for something, you're probably not going to get $100 an hour from the federal government. They're probably going to negotiate with you for maybe $90 an hour. So you have to be ready and understand that you're not going to get your highest price point. But once the federal government approves your schedule or your contract, then you are eligible to sell those items to any agency that buys via a GSA schedule for those items that are on your schedule. Now, I will tell you about it. The other thing about a GSA is it really is not in your best interest to get a GSA schedule. First of all, if you have not done any federal work previously, because you still have to market a GSA. Just like you'd have to market your company, you still have to market your GSA. And it's really, and as I mentioned before, there are minimum thresholds. You have to attain $25,000 of federal sales in the first 2 years that you have a GSA schedule. And in the third year, you have to attain at least 50,000. By that time, a cumulative 50,000. If you don't attain that amount, the federal government has a right to cancel your contract. So you will have gone through all that work and whatever to not attain anything. So usually what I do first is when people say to me, I need a GSA contract. I had a woman just this week that had a product. And when I did the research, I said, I can't even find anybody, first of all, that buys what you sell. Second of all, about it, there's no indication that a GSA is needed. What actually I learned is that she would be better selling through a construction company rather than trying to go direct, because it did not seem that any federal agency bought what she sold directly. So I hope that answers the question about GSA. Does all the person needs, does that information help?
Yes, Artie's given me a thumbs up, so I think so.
Okay. Great. Okay. Thanks for the question. I appreciate it. Okay, so let's talk about leverage. I use this term a lot because as a small business, you do have leverage. And I'm sorry, I'm going on for a while. So Amanda Jo, you can give me a high sign if you need me to wrap it up. But I do want to talk briefly about certifications. The number one thing that I want to tell you is the federal government will not buy from you because of a certification. So please do not think just because you're a woman-owned small business or you're an 8A or a service disabled company, they're not going to buy from you because you're that. That is my visual on that is a cupcake. Your value of what your company does is the cupcake. So think about when you buy a cupcake, you know, you want that rich, moist, chocolatey or whatever flavor you like cupcake. The certification is your icing, okay? So that's the way the federal government looks at it. Your certification, if they can check a box, but your value is there, you have good past performance, your technical specs are good, everything else is good, then the certifications are what's really gonna help you perhaps seal the deal. So if you're a service disabled veteran, even if you don't have a service disability rating, it is possible for you to get a service disabled veteran-owned small business verification from the Veterans Administration, and I can help you with the paperwork and understand that process better. The same thing if you're a veteran-owned company, same thing. If you're a woman-owned company, what that means is that you have to be majority owned, so 51% has to be woman-owned, and the woman has to manage the company. It can't just be on paper. So if you're 51% owned by a woman, you can get SBA certified as a woman-owned small business. If you're in a hub zone, and there is quite a bit of space out in the area where you are that is a hub zone, historically underutilized business zone. So, and you can very easily find that out. You go to SBA hub zone map, you type in your address, and it will tell you if you're in a hub zone. That is a protected business area. And there are some contracting, there's some contracting opportunities if you're able to get a hub zone certification. The last one is 8A. 8A is primarily used for certain cultural designations such as Black American, Hispanic, Southeast Asian, Native American, and Alaska Native. Those are the 5 cultures that are primarily considered qualified automatically to apply for aid. You still have to apply, but you're automatically considered to be socially and economically disadvantaged, which is what the 8A certification is all about. Again, this is another another place or another area in the federal government that I do not recommend that you look to get an 8A when you're first starting out, because again, you still have to market it, and it's really to your advantage to understand which agencies primarily buy what you sell via 8A certification. So that's another kind of a research project. Does anybody have any questions on that? So, go ahead and advance to the last slide, Amanda. I talked a little about subcontracting and teaming and the reasons why I think that it's important to do, but I want you to go to my last wind up slide with my information. I know that I've gone a little bit long. I have, you know, I could talk for hours, and I know that you all don't have that kind of time, but if I've interested you in any way, if you have any particular from your business perspective questions that we can answer, that we can help you with. This is my contact information, and I'm only providing you with my email address because probably as many of you are doing, we have been working remotely. So if you want to get to me quickly, send me an email. That's going to, you know, get to me immediately. And send me an email if you would like to have a consulting appointment, a one-on-one consulting appointment, or if you would like a consulting appointment with one of our business consultants. Send me an email. I will make sure that you get routed to the right person Actually, in the Winter Haven area, we have a number of consultants that work on business initiatives with companies. So you would probably want to meet with one of them first via the web. We're all working via the web right now. So you could first meet with them. And if you wanted to go on to government contracting, they could then refer you. Or if you start with me, I can refer you to one of them. So, so with that, I'll just wind up and ask Amanda Jo and Karen if there's any additional questions before we sign off.
There's nothing in the chat room at this point.
Karen, I do have a question unless the others, I have another question.
Go ahead, Artie.
So since we met, and thank you, it was a wonderful meeting. I had to do my homework afterwards. I think we met, it's been over a year. So I've repositioned. I was the immigration attorney, and now I'm kind of going into anti-trafficking consulting. And how would you find the subcontracting jobs then? Is it the same place at fpds.gov, or is that a different?
Well, usually what I would tell a person if they're looking at subcontracting is who would refer clients to you. So yeah, who would refer clients to you?
Okay, so I think for the anti-trafficking, it's a new area I'm getting into, but now because of the federal regulations and certain state laws, businesses have to certify that they have anti-trafficking policies and so forth.
Right.
And so I haven't gone into the weeds with who would be referring that out, but I think in order for businesses to do business with the federal government, they have to have these policies.
So I would think there'd be two agencies right off the top of my head. I would think that the Army would be a big one, or the Department of Defense, which is much broader than the Army. I would also think the Department of Homeland Security.
Yes.
And, and one of the huge areas in anti-trafficking would be armaments, arms, and anything like that. Plus, there's also particular products that cannot come in from China and several other countries in the Middle East. So that would be, that would be where I would start.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Karen, can I just ask you just to let everybody know what fees are involved? If they wanted to have a consultation with you or with any of the folks there at SBDC, what fees do they pay for that?
Oh, I'm sorry. So thank you for that question. There's actually no cost working with us. So
I love that.
Any of our business consultants can get you started, and also there really isn't a limit. Like some people come to us and they think that they're only limited to one appointment, and that's not true. So and our services are really client driven. So we don't have a protocol and say you must do this, you must do this, you must do this. You have 5 sessions, and each one of these sessions you have these assignments you have to complete. Now, that being said, nobody ever leaves me without homework. And I know a lot of our other consultants are the same way. So don't think that you're going to just leave and say, okay, well, I'll come back for the next session. It really is a partnership between the consultant and the client. And you really have to do your work. I mean, for me, doing the research is going to help so much to understand the federal government and the agencies. Rather than me doing it. It doesn't really help you to understand the agency as well as if you do the research on the front end.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you. I appreciate you asking that question. I forgot.
Oh, you're very welcome. I would sit there thinking that it's all free and they don't know. Yes. So we're going to tell them. I wanted to say thank you so much. I've learned so much. I'm frantically scribbling notes here. I'm like, oh, that's a good idea. Just so that everybody knows it's on here, I will share with you the slides from today. We have recorded today's meeting, and we'll have that too. That will be available. It'll come to you on first thing, and we'll put that in our on our website too for you to take a look at, because if anybody missed any of the notes, you made me want a cupcake at some point today. I've got to tell you that.
I wish I could give you a virtual cupcake.
I know, right? But it's all about the cupcake and not about the icing on the top. So we've got to make sure that we're getting our ducks in a row. And I love the support systems that you and your coworkers have to help get our businesses to that point. I know that we have several folks on here from many different industries, and everybody kind of comes at this from their own space. So I wanted to say thank you to everybody for joining us this morning. Thank you so much to Karen Krymski and her colleagues at SBDC at USF. We love you guys. Thank you so much for all the help that you've given us. And Artie, thank you so much for the introduction to Karen. This was amazing. So thank you all so much. Have a wonderful day. Karen, is there any other things in the chat room before we close out here?
Just several thank yous, very informative, just some notes like that. So just positive things. So thank you very much, Karen.
Terrific. I really appreciate it. Thanks again to all of you for spending time. I know that time and treasure are the only two things that we can control and we can never get back. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Stay safe, everyone, and have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.